my fiancée declared. "I can't come to your family dinner, my ex is having an anxiety attack and I'm the only one who can help him." For the fourth time this month. I said, "I understand." When I surprise visited to bring them both dinner, I discovered what kind of help he really needed. Hey folks, before we jump into the video, please consider subscribing and giving a thumbs up if you're excited for more stories like this. Thank you. Let's dive in. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and I genuinely thought I'd found my person, someone who valued family, commitment, and building something meaningful together. Then her ex-boyfriend Ryan came back into the picture, and suddenly my fiancée became a part-time therapist for a man she claimed was struggling with severe anxiety attacks. It started small, missing a casual dinner here and there, but escalated quickly into something that made my stomach twist every time my phone buzzed with her apologetic texts. The first major red flag was my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner, an event we'd planned for weeks, complete with a custom photo album I'd spent hours assembling. "I'm so sorry, Alex, but Ryan's having another episode and I'm the only one who really understands his triggers," Sarah explained over the phone while I sat at the restaurant table, watching my grandmother ask the waiter to hold off on ordering because she was sure Sarah was just running late. 2 weeks later, it was my parents' 25th anniversary celebration, and once again, his anxiety is really bad tonight, and Megan just doesn't get how to handle these situations like I do. I found myself saying, "I understand," repeatedly, even as I watched my mother's disappointed face when I had to explain why my fiancé couldn't make it to yet another family milestone. The breaking point should have been the surprise engagement party my sister had secretly organized, complete with both our families and friends gathered to celebrate our upcoming wedding, but there I stood alone, making excuses for Sarah's absence while she was supposedly helping Ryan through his most severe anxiety attack yet. "Ryan needs someone who truly understands his mental health struggles," she kept repeating, as if I was being unreasonable for wanting my fiancé present at our own engagement celebration, and I kept nodding and saying I understood, even though a growing part of me was starting to understand something entirely different. My analytical mind started picking up patterns that didn't add up, and once I began paying attention, the inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. Ryan's anxiety attacks seemed to have an uncanny ability to perfectly coincide with my family events, yet mysteriously never interfered with Sarah's work presentations, client dinners, or weekend trips with her girlfriends to Napa Valley. When Sarah had her big marketing pitch for the Henderson account, a presentation she'd stressed about for weeks, Ryan's mental health remained perfectly stable, but the moment my cousin announced his wedding date, suddenly Ryan needed emergency emotional support that lasted all weekend. "It's just a coincidence, Alex," Sarah would say when I gently pointed out the timing, but my engineering background had taught me that patterns this consistent rarely happened by accident. Then came the expensive gifts, each one accompanied by explanations that grew more elaborate over time. First it was a designer handbag, then diamond earrings, followed by a luxury watch that cost more than my monthly salary. "Ryan's been so grateful for my help that he keeps insisting on these thank you gifts," she'd explain, admiring the latest addition to her collection, and when I suggested maybe Ryan should express his gratitude in less expensive ways, she'd get defensive and remind me how important it was to support people struggling with mental health. The late-night phone calls started around month 3 of this arrangement, always taken in the other room with hushed, urgent whispers that stopped abruptly when I walked by. "Just checking on Ryan's state of mind," she'd say, but her face would flush and she'd quickly change the subject, and I noticed she'd started password protecting her phone for the first time in our relationship. The real wake-up call came when I decided to surprise her with Thai food from her favorite restaurant during one of Ryan's supposed emergencies, tracking her location through the Find My Friends app we'd shared since the beginning of our relationship, only to discover that while she claimed to be at Ryan's modest apartment across town, her phone was pinging from the Four Seasons downtown. "There must be some kind of GPS error," she stammered when I asked about it, but the excuses were getting thinner and my patience was running out. The final straw came on a Tuesday evening when Sarah rushed out for another one of Ryan's severe episodes, and instead of sitting home feeling sorry for myself, I decided to be the supportive fiancé and bring them both some comfort food from that Italian place Ryan supposedly loved. I picked up chicken parmesan, garlic bread, and tiramisu, the kind of thoughtful gesture that the old Alex would have been proud of, except this time I was operating on pure instinct and a growing suspicion that something was fundamentally wrong with this entire situation. Ryan lived in what Sarah had described as a modest apartment complex, but when I pulled up to the address she'd given me months ago, I found myself staring at a luxury high-rise condo building with a doorman and valet parking, the kind of place that rented for more per month than I made in 2. I talked my way past the doorman by explaining I was bringing dinner to a friend having a mental health crisis, And when I reached the 20th floor and knocked on the door marked 2012, the last thing I expected was for Ryan to answer in nothing but silk pajamas, looking perfectly relaxed and definitely not in the middle of an anxiety attack. "Alex? What the hell are you doing here?" he stammered, his face going pale as he tried to block my view into the apartment, but I could already see over his shoulder into a living space that was filled with expensive furniture, artwork that looked like it belonged in a gallery, and, most jarringly, Sarah's laughter echoing from what was clearly the bedroom. "I brought food for you and Sarah," I said calmly, holding up the takeout bags, "since you're having such a hard time tonight." The color drained completely from Ryan's face as Sarah appeared in the doorway wearing one of his dress shirts and nothing else, her expression shifting from post-intimate contentment to absolute terror in the span of about 2 seconds. "Alex, I can explain," she started, but my eyes had already moved past her to the coffee table where wedding planning magazines were spread out like a paper trail of betrayal, complete with venue photos, dress designs, and what appeared to be a timeline for a ceremony that was definitely not ours. "Don't bother explaining," I said, setting the food down on the hallway floor and taking one last look at the scene that confirmed everything I'd suspected. "I think I understand perfectly now." The apartment was essentially a shrine to their relationship, filled with photos of romantic getaways I'd never heard about, expensive gifts that clearly hadn't come from gratitude, and the kind of domestic setup that doesn't happen overnight. And as I walked back toward the elevator, I realized that every single one of Ryan's anxiety attacks had been code for their secret meetings, and I'd been funding their elaborate deception through the joint account Sarah had access to for our wedding planning. Instead of confronting Sarah immediately, I decided to channel my engineering mindset into gathering evidence, starting with a call to Megan, Ryan's supposed girlfriend who I'd met only briefly at a party months earlier. I was wondering when someone would finally reach out to me, Megan said when I explained why I was calling, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and exhaustion that told me she'd been carrying her own suspicions for quite some time. "I've been investigating Ryan's behavior for weeks now because something felt completely off about his supposed anxiety issues and all these emergency calls from your fiancé." We met the next day at a coffee shop halfway between our offices, and what Megan revealed made my stomach drop even further than discovering them together had. "I hired a private investigator last month," she admitted, sliding a thick folder across the table, because Ryan's story about helping Sarah through her own mental health crisis never made sense, especially when he started spending money we didn't have on things he claimed were work bonuses. The folder contained hotel security footage dating back 4 months, credit card statements showing systematic withdrawals from what I recognized as my joint account with Sarah, and a paper trail that revealed the true scope of their deception. "They've been using your savings to fund weekend getaways, expensive dinners, and apparently a whole second life," Megan explained, pointing to receipts from luxury resorts, jewelry stores, and high-end restaurants that I'd never been to. The most devastating discovery was buried at the bottom of the pile: flight confirmations and hotel reservations for a Vegas elopement scheduled for the following week, just 3 days after what was supposed to be Sarah's bachelorette party and 5 days before our own wedding. "The private investigator found this yesterday," Megan said, handing me a printed email conversation between Sarah and Ryan discussing how they'd stage one final anxiety emergency to cover their elopement, then return as a married couple and break the news to both of us simultaneously. Ryan actually wrote, "Alex will probably cry, but he'll get over it, guys like him always do." The financial records showed that Sarah had systematically transferred nearly $23,000 from our joint savings account over the past 6 months, each withdrawal coinciding perfectly with Ryan's supposed mental health crises. And as I sat there staring at the evidence of their elaborate con game, I realized they hadn't just been planning to break our hearts, they'd been planning to leave us both financially devastated in the process. "What do you want to do about this?" Megan asked, and I could see in her eyes the same cold determination that was building in my chest. "I want to make sure they never have the chance to do this to anyone else." Rather than confronting Sarah and Ryan directly, I decided they deserved an audience for their performance, so I spent the next 3 days orchestrating what they would think was a quiet family dinner but would actually be a carefully planned intervention with both sets of parents present. I told Sarah's mother that I wanted to surprise Sarah with a family gathering to celebrate our upcoming wedding, and I told my own parents that Sarah had been going through a difficult time and could use some family support. Neither statement was technically a lie, just strategically incomplete. I arranged for the dinner to take place at my parents' house, set up a laptop with all of Megan's evidence queued up and ready to present, and made sure both families would be settled in the living room before Sarah and Ryan arrived for what they thought would be a casual meal. "I'm so glad you're finally including us more in your relationship," Sarah said as we drove to my parents' house that Friday evening, completely oblivious to the fact that she was about to face the most uncomfortable dinner party of her life. When we walked through the front door and Sarah saw not just my parents but her own mother and father sitting alongside Megan in the living room, her face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if the situation weren't so devastating. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice already taking on that defensive tone I'd come to recognize whenever she was caught in a lie. "Ryan should be here any minute," I said calmly, gesturing for her to take a seat, "and then we're going to have a conversation about honesty, commitment, and the difference between anxiety attacks and adultery." The color drained from Sarah's face as Ryan walked through the door, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw the assembled group and immediately understanding that this was not the casual dinner he'd been expecting. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, opening the laptop and connecting it to the television screen, "I've gathered you all here tonight because Sarah and Ryan have something they'd like to share with their families about their relationship." The room fell silent as I clicked through the security footage, financial records, and email conversations, watching both sets of parents process the evidence of their children's elaborate deception while Sarah and Ryan sat frozen like deer in headlights. "This is insane," Sarah finally exploded, jumping to her feet. "You can't just ambush us like this. Like you ambushed our engagement by planning your own secret wedding?" I replied, clicking to the Vegas reservation screen, "Or like you ambushed our joint savings account by stealing $23,000 to fund your affair?" That's when Sarah's mother spoke up, her voice shaking with a mixture of disappointment and fury. "Sarah Michelle, please tell me this isn't true," and the use of her full name seemed to break something inside Sarah because she suddenly started crying and blurted out, "I'm pregnant, and I don't even know whose baby it is." The room erupted in shocked gasps, but before anyone could process that bombshell, Megan stood up and added her own revelation. "Well, since we're sharing secrets, Ryan's been embezzling money from his company's client accounts to pay for this luxury lifestyle you've both been living." The dinner that was supposed to celebrate love and family had turned into a complete implosion of two people's carefully constructed lies, and as I sat there watching Sarah and Ryan face the consequences of their choices in front of the people who'd raised them to be better than this, I felt something I hadn't expected: genuine pity for how completely they destroyed their own lives. The legal consequences started rolling in faster than either Sarah or Ryan had anticipated, beginning with my decision to press criminal charges for theft and fraud after consulting with an attorney who specialized in financial crimes. $23,000, systematic withdrawal patterns, and evidence of premeditation, my lawyer explained during our first meeting. This isn't just a civil matter, it's criminal fraud, and the prosecutor's office takes these cases very seriously. Within a week of filing the police report, both Sarah and Ryan were facing formal charges, and Ryan's embezzlement situation exploded when his company's audit revealed he'd been systematically stealing from client accounts to fund what the corporate fraud division would later describe as an elaborate lifestyle fraud scheme. The story somehow made its way to the local news, probably through someone in the prosecutor's office who thought it was too bizarre to keep quiet, and suddenly our private nightmare became a public spectacle with Channel 7 running a segment about the engagement scam couple who used fake anxiety attacks to cover their affair and theft. Sarah lost her job at the marketing firm within days of the news story airing, not just because of the criminal charges but because her employer realized that her supposed dedication to helping a mentally ill ex-boyfriend had actually been a cover for systematic fraud that could destroy their company's reputation. Ryan's situation was even worse, fired immediately and facing federal investigation for the embezzlement charges, with his company's legal team making it clear they planned to pursue every possible criminal and civil remedy to recover the stolen funds and protect their remaining clients. The most pathetic part was watching them attempt damage control through social media, with Sarah posting a series of Instagram stories claiming I had been financially abusive and controlling, and that she'd only turned to Ryan because I was emotionally unavailable and obsessed with money. "Alex never supported my dreams," she wrote in one particularly desperate post. "He made me feel like I was just an expense instead of a partner, and Ryan was the only one who understood my need for emotional security." The irony was absolutely stunning. The woman who'd stolen $23,000 of my money was trying to paint me as financially abusive, and the man who'd embezzled from his clients was being portrayed as her emotional rescuer. Their attempts at rewriting history fell apart immediately when Megan released the text message conversations and email evidence, including Ryan's own words about how guys like Alex always get over it, and Sarah's detailed plans for covering their tracks during the Vegas elopement. Both families disowned them after that dinner confrontation, with Sarah's parents releasing a statement through their church expressing their deep shame and disappointment in their daughter's choices, while Ryan's family simply stopped acknowledging his existence entirely, going so far as to remove him from their Christmas card photo. Sarah ended up moving in with her elderly Aunt Margaret, a 78-year-old woman who reluctantly took her in only after Sarah's parents made it clear that homelessness was the alternative, and even then Aunt Margaret made Sarah sign a written agreement about contributing to household expenses and maintaining respectful behavior. The transformation from confident marketing professional planning her dream wedding to unemployed, criminally charged, pregnant woman living in her aunt's spare bedroom was so complete that I almost felt sorry for her, until I remembered that every single consequence was the direct result of choices she'd made while actively deceiving and stealing from the people who loved her most. 6 months after that devastating family dinner, I received a text from Megan that made me laugh out loud in the middle of a work meeting. "You're not going to believe this, but the DNA results came back and the baby isn't Ryan's. It belongs to some guy named Marcus that Sarah was apparently seeing on the side while she was seeing Ryan on the side while engaged to you." The revelation that Sarah had been running not just a double life but essentially a triple life was so absurd that it almost felt like something out of a soap opera, except the consequences were devastatingly real for everyone involved. Ryan's reaction to the paternity news was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd blown up his entire life for a woman who turned out to be playing him just as thoroughly as she'd played me. He completely lost whatever remaining dignity he had and started bombarding Megan with desperate texts begging for another chance. "I know I messed up, but Sarah manipulated me too," he wrote in one particularly pathetic message that Megan screenshot and sent to me. "I realize now that what we had was real and I threw it away for someone who was using me." Instead of responding privately, Megan did something that was both brilliant and utterly brutal. She posted their entire text conversation on social media with the caption, "When the man who destroyed your life for his soulmate finds out she was cheating on him too and wants to come crawling back." The post went viral in our social circle within hours, and Ryan became the cautionary tale that everyone shared when talking about karma and consequences. Meanwhile, Megan and I had been spending more time together, initially just as fellow survivors of Sarah and Ryan's deception, but gradually developing something that felt genuine and hopeful in ways my relationship with Sarah never had. "We both know what betrayal feels like," Megan said during one of our long conversations about trust and relationships, "but more importantly, we both know what red flags look like and how to value people who actually show up consistently." Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately, built on shared experiences of learning to trust again rather than the impulsive passion that had characterized my engagement to Sarah. The last update I received about Sarah came through a mutual acquaintance who mentioned seeing her working at a retail store in the mall, visibly pregnant and looking exhausted, trying to save money for a baby whose father wanted nothing to do with either of them because Marcus had his own family and had made it clear that Sarah's pregnancy was her problem to solve. Ryan, meanwhile, was facing federal charges that his attorney had warned could result in significant prison time, and his former company was pursuing civil action to recover the embezzled funds, which meant even if he avoided jail, he'd be financially ruined for years to come. I kept all the evidence from our investigation, not out of spite or a desire for revenge, but as a reminder that trusting your instincts when something feels wrong and demanding respect in relationships isn't negotiable, it's essential. When people ask me if I'm angry about what Sarah and Ryan did, I tell them honestly that I'm grateful, because discovering their betrayal before I married Sarah saved me from years of being married to someone who saw me as a means to an end rather than a partner to build a life with. Today, Megan and I are planning our own future together, one based on honesty, shared values, and the kind of mutual respect that makes both people feel secure rather than constantly questioning where they stand. And every time I see how naturally supportive and genuine she is, I'm reminded that the right person doesn't make you wonder if you're good enough. They make you grateful that you waited for someone who truly deserves your best.